Hi, welcome to Financial Planning Explained, and I'm your host, Mike Menninger, certified financial planner, owner and founder of Menninger and Associates Financial Planning. As I always note, I like for my shows to be educational in nature, and I do what I can to try to make it as entertaining as possible as well, and try to focus in on the 6 areas of financial planning. And today's guest is going to be talking about estate planning, however, with a little bit of a twist. It's kind of interesting. I'm really excited about my guest today. My guest is Paul Deloughery, who is an estate attorney, but also he is the founder and owner of Sudden Wealth Protection Law. And thank you very much for joining us today, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Mike, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good, good, good. So the unique piece, we've talked a little bit before the show, and I found that it was very unique what you do. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your firm.
Sure. Well, I'll just start off by saying that the basic theme of what I do professionally is unprepared heirs tend to lose their inheritance. Unprepared heirs tend to lose their inheritance. And that's the reason for the name of my law firm. So we help families and business owners protect their assets and also empower their children to be responsible stewards of their wealth. So what we do is a little bit beyond just typical wills and trusts and so on. We're looking further out to make sure that the next generation or next generations actually receive the benefit of the inheritance.
Right. And so you told me the story as to what motivated you to begin this path. Do you care to share that story with the audience?
I will share it. And I have to say that this happened back in 2009. And it has taken me this long to really, I guess, own it and get over my feelings about it. But in August 2009, I was standing in my father's house in Vancouver, Washington. And he had just been admitted to hospice, and I was looking at his desk with a computer and printer on it, and on top of the printer was his last year's 2008 federal income tax return. And at the bottom of the first page, it showed a $1.5 million passive income. And over the coming weeks, I realized that I was going to be inheriting his $28 million estate.
Wow.
And then imagine that within 5 years, most of that was gone. And what happened is I experienced what's called sudden wealth syndrome. I was unprepared. I didn't know who to trust. I had intense emotions. My father died shortly after I met him. Okay, strange story. So
that is a very interesting story. So you had only just met him.
Yeah, he was my biological father. So
wow.
He was basically, what's that?
Wow, that's wow.
Yeah. So he was my biological father, and he had been a Vietnam War vet. And just long story short, my mom, he and my mom had an argument. Shortly before I was born. He came back from leave from serving in Vietnam, and my mom announced that she was pregnant. He was doing the math and didn't think that it was possible that it was his child, and they never got over that. She insisted on a quick divorce, and then a couple years after I was born, my mom met Henry Deloughery, so I have the last name Deloughery. I was never adopted though, so I was still legally the son of Paul Wiest, who was the name of my biological father. And anyway, what happened, because it was a windfall for me, I was unprepared, I didn't know what to do with it, I had no foundation, didn't know who to trust. I ended up trusting the wrong people, and I got into some private equity deals that sounded really exciting at the time. And they were basically con artists. I mean,
I was going to ask you that. If they were
I discovered that a lot of private equity deals are not very sound investments.
Really?
And you have to be really careful.
Did they find you, or did you find them?
Oh, we kind of found each other. So my father made his money from penny stocks.
Oh, interesting.
And so I thought, well, shoot, I can learn how to invest also. And I thought that there was some fast track to learning how to invest, and there isn't.
Oh, that's the fast track. That's one fast track way of learning is the hard way, just so you know. And by the way, I jokingly say there's a reason why these stocks are worth only a penny. But anyway, every once in a while you'd hit a home run, and it sounds like your biological father did that. However,
I mean, he spent years studying it, and he was really smart.
Well, good.
But let me tell you how it impacted me. So losing the money, I mean, aside from obviously losing the money, that was not how it mostly impacted me. The first thing was I felt ashamed because most of the people around assume, or they imagine, that if they won the lottery, they would make good choices.
Right.
And it's just this idea that people have. And so that's who I was surrounded by. I was surrounded by people who assumed that they would have done a better job. And I lost relationships. I lost relationships with family and friends over it, maybe from jealousy or different things, or we just couldn't relate anymore. I was angry at the supposed investment people who were just using my money to enrich themselves, and I felt lonely and isolated because I didn't know. I didn't know who to talk to, and it took me years. Also, I lost time. It took me years to get my feet back on the ground, figure out who I am, get my pride back, and be able to move forward. So I lost the three things that are most important to people. I lost time, I lost money, obviously, and I lost my reputation and quality of life and relationships with people.
Right. That's a sad story. Have you recovered most of them?
And it's all because my father, I mean, okay, at one level it's because my father didn't have an estate plan, and actually a well-done estate plan, I don't just mean like a LegalZoom trust or something, but a well-done estate plan where I could have been allowed a grieving time, like a period of time to get used to the fact that I had a bunch of that my net worth was a lot more than it used to be.
Right.
That would have made a huge difference, and then also just some steps to prepare me, so I had so I would have had a sense of stewardship over the money.
Well, that's very interesting. I could see three different categories of people who would fall into that. First and foremost, people who win the lottery. Okay, I haven't won the lottery yet, but then again, I would imagine that my chances would improve if I actually played it, but that's a separate issue.
That's what I've heard.
Lottery winners. I could see athletes, actors, I suppose.
Sure.
And also people receiving inheritances, just like you did. And a lot of the folks that I work with, their children have no idea what they're worth, and they don't really want them to know. But one of the things that I could see may have helped, and I think about this, and you're actually the only person I've ever met that had this happen to them. And I always say that if I received that kind of money, and I reference as an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, I probably would not have handled it properly. But you are even older, and that is a very valuable lesson that should be portrayed to folks that you deal with, my clients that I deal with, because one of the things that we do with our trusts is that we have the money staggered as to when their beneficiaries can receive it, and call it the 3-strike plan. If you give them a bunch of money when they're 30, okay, if they blow it, at least they have strike 2 and get another piece at 40. And if they blow it again, at least hopefully by age 50, that they'll at least have realized after 2 strikes. And if they blow it the third time, well, they were probably destined to blow it. But I think it's great that you're able to talk about it, and more importantly, it's the next step is to be able to take your life lesson and apply it. So you apply it to both estate planning, because you're an estate attorney, but didn't you also say that you have a second business that is designed to consult for the recipients?
Well, that's right. So what I've discovered is that there's a, how do I say it? There's estate planning, which is the goal to pass the wealth to the next generation.
Correct.
That's not always the same as how to successfully transfer wealth. And now, I know they sound the same, but they're not the same.
Right.
So, and let me use an analogy or kind of a story.
Yes, please do. Stories are always best.
Okay, imagine that you want to get some eggs. So you go to the grocery store, you go to the egg section, and you open, the carton, make sure all the eggs are okay, and you go to the checkout line, you pay for the eggs, put them in the little flimsy plastic bag, and then you drive home, and you get your flimsy plastic bag with the eggs out of the car, and just as you start entering into the house, the bag breaks. Well, that's actually considered the gold standard of estate planning, meaning you got the eggs into the house, and just like the grocery store doesn't really care what happens to the eggs once you get to the house, that's really your responsibility. Traditional estate planning also doesn't really care what the next generation does with it, and so the legal instruments that people talk about, wills and trusts and powers of attorney, that's merely intended to get things to the next generation. Now, you talk about like 3 strikes or doling money out in tranches. That's actually a really good idea. It's a it's a passive idea, but at least the idea is that people will learn on their own,
right?
And hopefully be better with the money when they get it the next time. So the reason, to answer your question, the reason for having a consulting company is one of the other areas of disconnect is, as an estate planning attorney, I have to be really clear on who my clients are. My clients are typically mom and dad.
Correct.
Often they're a business owner, professional, something like that. And my clients cannot be the kids, typically, because there's a conflict of interest.
Of course.
But that creates problems then if we're trying to deal with, especially a large amount of money being transferred down to future generations. So when working with families, I'll take off the lawyer hat and put on the consulting hat. And that allows me to work more holistically and deal with feelings and relationship issues and all of that stuff.
So are you dealing with
and it works the best. You were talking about how a lot of clients don't want to talk about how much money they have. That's actually a recipe for disaster. So as a consultant, I'm able to help facilitate the conversation, because it's really hard
parents
as
to do that,
as
right,
mom or dad to have that conversation, and they're still mom and dad, and so they're still not sure how to do it, and it allows us to help facilitate that conversation, and we've had a lot of luck with that.
Well, that's good. That's good. And so at what point in time do you begin the conversation with the children? Do you do that while the parents are still alive?
Oh, my God,
that seems the best time to do it.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, because if problems arise because kids have different ideas in their minds about who is supposed to get what, or what was the money for, or are we supposed to keep the vacation house or sell it, or is the middle child really supposed to move into the vacation house and just keep living there? I mean, there's all these things, and that's the kind of stuff that causes litigation, and
sure,
it's much kinder to the next generation to have difficult conversations up front.
Absolutely. Hey, Paul, believe it or not, we're up against break already. So
okay.
This is terrific conversation, and
great,
we'll pick this up. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just one moment.
Great.
Have you saved enough for retirement? Are you financially prepared for an emergency or unexpected event? Have you thought about your financial future?
Hi, I'm Mike Menninger, founder of Menninger and Associates Financial Planning. For over 20 years, we have been answering our clients' questions just like these as we develop unique and comprehensive financial plans tailored to meet their needs. When addressing your financial plan, we incorporate your entire financial picture, including taxes, estate planning, as well as investment planning and retirement planning. So call us today for a complimentary, no obligation consultation.
A unique approach to financial planning.
Welcome back to Financial Planning Explained. And I'm here with my guest, Paul Deloughery, who is a very unique estate planner. And where we left off before the break, we were talking about how you try to facilitate the discussion to get the parents to involve the children. And I can already see, and I've seen this unfortunately, where, when the estate transfer process, not even the process, but when there ends up being arguments between the descendants, you really hate to see a family break up over money, but we all know that money is a real source of being able to do something like that. So how do you broach it with parents who are less reluctant to involve their children in the estate plan? How do you go about doing that?
Well, if the parents care about what happens to the inheritance, what happens when their kids or grandchildren get the money or whatever they're inheriting, then it's just a matter of educating them.
Right.
I mean, like I said at first, unprepared heirs tend to lose their inheritance. And, if you just think about people in your life, like how many of them are still managing and investing money that their grandparents made? Not that many.
Yeah.
So it tends to get lost.
Right.
Now, there are families that keep it going. Oftentimes those are families that have a business.
Oh, I can see a challenge there.
What's that?
I can see a challenge there.
Oh, for sure. But to answer your question, how to motivate them or how to talk to parents about this issue. I mean, if they care about what happens to the money, if they want it to benefit the family for a longer period, then that's it. Part of what's needed is communication and specifically. So how do you actually? Can I go off into the next topic? I think the next topic is how do you actually start bridging the gap?
Well, yeah, and then talking to the kids. I mean, bridging the gap, basically you answered the question right there, is you need to be able to get the parents to buy in, which is you educating the parents because, and you can speak from experience, but you can educate the parents to the importance of getting the children involved. So now when you have the discussion with the children, I would imagine it's also an educational process to them. Once again, you're sharing your life experience to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes because, like you said, it's not just the loss of money. All of the emotions that go with it can actually be more catastrophic, and it wouldn't surprise me if that creates a lot of suicides. Have you heard any statistic on that?
Oh, well, I don't know about actual statistics, but I know that I've seen it even in my own clients, and I've just seen it in people that I've known.
I think I've heard a statistic that 95%...
Drug addiction, suicide, all kinds of things.
I've heard 95% of the people who win the lottery are bankrupt within 5 years.
Right.
And that probably goes hand in hand with what you're discussing. So you have a separate consulting company that works with the people, and hopefully you catch them before they receive the money, because after they receive the money, they're probably, I don't want to say egotistic or arrogant, but once they receive the money, they're rather excited. Look at all this money I got, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the person's mindset changes. And someone coined the term sudden wealth syndrome, and that's basically what it is. It's this identity crisis that, so subconsciously they're still the person that they were. They're still the paycheck to paycheck person, and that's what it was for me. But then there's a disconnect between that, like who I see myself internally, and the fact that there's a bunch of money in the bank or the TD Ameritrade account or whatever.
Right.
And it's that, and the subconscious ends up just sabotaging the person. That's what happened to me. So,
I can absolutely see that. So now, the challenge that you broached just a few moments ago, and this will probably be the last topic. When you have a business, a closely held business, a lot of times what happens is that the value of the business is in the owner of the business. And if they've done a good job of not only estate planning, but business continuity and business succession planning, then the value of the business continues to get passed on to the children. And, we've experienced this with a large business in our area, a grocery store chain. I don't want to name it. But what do you do in the case of some of the kids are in the business and some of them aren't? That creates a challenge.
I mean, that certainly is an issue that needs to be talked about. But I want to address something, because you mentioned keeping a business in the family. And this is frankly keeping any wealth in the family. Sure, you can have an estate plan. Sure, you can have a financial plan. Sure, you can have a great CPA and some life insurance. But the missing essential element is, how do you pass the values on to the next generation? How do you teach the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth generation to be stewards of that?
Right.
And that, there's been research, families that, or children and grandchildren who know family stories, who understand family stories, are much more likely to have a sense of stewardship and to be careful with what they receive. And now there are three different kinds of family stories. You have the one version where we were really poor and everything got better. Our grandparents and parents made money and now we're rich. Then there's the other version where we had a bunch of money generations ago and now we don't have so much. Like where there's a downward trajectory.
Yeah, that's
and then
tougher.
Frankly, the better version is just the realistic one, that Grandma and Grandpa had some struggles and they had some good times and they had some bad times, but they stuck it out and they had a work ethic. And then, the parents did the same thing. They had some good times and they had some bad times, and the money went up and the money went down, but they stuck it out. And that's really what real life is about. And having stories where even wealthy families or families that I work with will put together books, an actual book, bound, like really nice book with family stories of the grandparents or family stories of the parents, or going back and so on. And that's just a beautiful way. I found that those families tend to just keep plugging along generation after generation because they have a strong sense of who they are.
It's a legacy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're dealing with family businesses, that the subsequent generations were participating in the business.
For sure.
So they have, a sense of pride, and potentially watched, growing up as a kid, they watched their grandparents, and then they watched their parents in the business, and next thing you know, they're in the business. So I could certainly see that. But I also see, too, that the transition of wealth to that particular generation is probably going to be smoother because they watched it grow and participated in its growth, as opposed to it just falling onto their lap, more like in the lines of the lottery. The lottery is the perfect example. And I've had that go through my mind. What would I do if I won the lottery? And I think about all of the people, I'm paying off. I can only think about how many people's mortgages I'm paying off and everything else just to help them out. But then, where do you draw the line? And is everybody going to be standing at the front door? Is their phone ringing all the time? And, you give to one charitable organization, they notify every other charitable organization. And I could just see how wealth can actually be a hassle. So, anyway. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Because we're out of time, Paul. And is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, sure. I guess just to close, yes, having a lot of wealth can be a hassle. There's a transition of finding people that you can trust, and it's so important just to find some people that you can trust, and frankly, to take your time. If you come into a sudden inheritance or a sudden windfall, you just need to take some time. And one thing I wish I would have done is locked up some of the money in an irrevocable trust and had a independent trustee just manage it, even just 20% of it, or something. Because in my mind, I thought I was a great investor, and until it was all gone.
Right. Hindsight is 2020. Hey, Paul, this was absolutely terrific. It's very educational, very emotional, quite frankly. It'd be very difficult. What I'd like you to do, if you could, take a few seconds and just tell people how they might be able to get a hold of you in the event that they're in a position where they want to transfer wealth, they want to be able to, or they just received sudden wealth. Take a moment and just tell us how people can reach you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So you can go to our website. It's Sudden Wealth Protection Law, and I think it's on the screen, but Sudden Wealth Protection Law, phone number is 602-443-4888, and you can also shoot me an email at paul@suddenwealthprotectionlaw.com.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and I hope all of the viewers enjoyed this. This is a very interesting episode. Of course, it doesn't apply to everyone, but guess what? It applies to everyone, really, because it may not be 14 million, it may not be 100 million. Fact of the matter is that if you receive an inheritance or any type of windfall, it doesn't matter how much it is. If it's a lot to you, it's a lot. And therefore, what it really boils down to, Paul hit the nail on the head. What you really need to do is surround yourself with trusted people, whether it's financial advisors, accountants, family, friends. You need people with whom you can trust to help guide you from towards making good decisions. I thank you very much for joining my show. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks, Mike.